Alrighty then. Hello everyone. This is Peter Svidler with my first banter of the week. We're starting a bit early today because didn't want to clash with Jan's show, and that actually led to a slight setback. And let's begin by the usual. Please give me a brief shout out in chat as to whether you can hear me and whether the sound is fine. And then I'll try and explain why the decision to move the show back an hour seems to have backfired a little bit. The thing is, I assume that by this point we will we will know the results of the Olympiad, and I honestly still don't. My Facebook feed, which is not very heavily chess related, but there is enough chess people out there on it to it being dominated, to it become dominated by the Olympiad right now. It seems currently to favor the Ukrainians, and I've seen some people mention that the Ukrainians are already being congratulated, including by my team, by the Russians and by the others. And from what I've seen, there's one very enigmatic tweet from Lawrence Trent dated about an hour ago, which also seems to suggest that the Americans are suddenly very worried about the tie breaks. It has to be said that it's a bit weird that the head-to-head is not counted, because the Americans have won their match against Ukraine early in the tournament, and it should count for something, in my opinion. It's I don't really have a dog in this fight. I supported Russia. We came in thirds, and nothing could really change that even before round 11 started. But in terms of gold medals, if it turns out that the head-to-head result between the two teams does not count for anything at all, I think it's slightly weird. I think, in a team competition, there should be place in the tiebreak system for the results between the tying teams. But currently it seems like the Ukrainians win by 3.5 half against Slovenia might be enough to just get them over the line barely. And it brings me to my next point, which is slightly tongue-in-cheek, but ever so slightly. It would appear that the single biggest influence on the outcome of this Olympiad may have been exerted by the one and only Chessbra, because Canada, in their, I'm very confident in saying, in their best Olympiad result ever. They played on board one today, and they played both Ukraine and the US. Official site, I'm reading chat as I'm speaking. So if the US won, I think it's probably the slightly fairer result, considering the fact that they won the head-to-head. But had the Ukrainians won, it would not have been any kind of a travesty as well. They played a fantastic tournament, and in their match against the US, Pavel Ulyanov lost a perfectly serviceable position against Caruana. But I want to return to my previous point. Canada had a fantastic tournament. Evgeny Bareyev, my old friend, played board one. Had a rough couple of last days. Lost lost to Shirov yesterday, I believe, and lost to Caruana in a brutal game today. But still, more than held his own, I think, on board one. Won some important games as well, including a game against Ulyanov in their match against the Ukrainians. But in particular, I think it's noteworthy to say that in the match between Canada and Ukraine, Eric Hansen on board 4 had a completely winning position in a... okay, so that's not the result of... disregard what I said about the official site. I don't have the official site open because I don't want to open any more windows for fear of, crashing this comp or the comp I'm reading chat on. Back to Chessbra. Chessbra had a completely winning position against Volokitin, which would have won the Canadians their match against Ukraine had he won it. but he misplayed it. He went for a brilliancy in a position which didn't really require brilliancy. It was winning with normal moves, and missed the Zwischenzug. The position was probably equal after that, but he got, I guess, so flustered by his mistake that he ended up losing it. And that led to Canada losing to Ukraine. And today, Eric won a very important game against Shankland on board 4, which led to the match between Canada and the US becoming very close. The US won it with only 2.5 against a point and a half, and not by any kind of a larger margin. I'm pretty sure that a larger win than that would have erased all questions about tie breaks and would have secured a gold medal for the US. But the fact that Chesbra won today means that I am, prefacing this show by this introduction where I'm saying, I would have loved an additional hour here, because I think in the next hour we probably will have a clear picture of who won this Olympiad. And yes, I wanted to speak a little bit about people who impressed the most, and somehow I kept on ignoring his performances, I think, in my previous 2 Banters during this Olympiad, which is ridiculous. I think pride of place goes to Eugenio Torre, who, you probably know who he is, and you probably have read about his results by now, but what he achieved during this Olympiad is absolutely tremendous. He is by no means a young man by now, and he scored, I don't know what he did today, but I think he was an 8 out of 9 before today, and he played a tremendous level of opposition. It's not like he was playing, the Philippines are a decently strong team, and they played very, very decent opposition almost throughout the tournament, and the result Eugenio showed in this event is absolutely fantastic. So I would like to begin with him. The Indians, Vidit today won a very important game in their match against Norway. I mentioned him before. He seems to be a very, very promising young player. I'm pretty sure we'll see more of him. 10 out of 11 by Torre. This is frankly beyond belief. I don't know how people do this. Sort of closer to home, Vladimir Kramnik once again showed that he is playing some of the best chess of his career currently. It's not just the result he's shown on a mixture of first and second boards, and Russia played only strong teams from round maybe 2 onwards, definitely from round 3 onwards. But the manner in which he seems to be approaching his chess these days is absolutely fantastic. It's a joy to watch, and sadly his result will not be enough to carry the team to more than the bronze, which obviously for the Russian team is not going to be considered a success. It's not. Stop talking because chat seems to now be saying that the US has won, so let's stick with this story. And as I said, whoever won on tiebreak will be a deserved winner, because those are the 2 teams which played, I think, the most consistent and the best chess in this Olympiad. But this result, I feel, makes slightly more sense because they won their match against the Ukrainians. If it's actually the US, I'm sorry, something is happening to my voice. If it's actually the US who won, I think from common sense perspective, it makes slightly more sense due to the fact that they won their match against the Ukrainians. But full credit to both of those teams. They played excellent chess, and kind of lost my train of thought there due to some weird happenings in chat. Something else I wanted to say, and it's now completely eluded me, which is a bit embarrassing. The point I wanted to make, I've seen it made on the internet, and I think it's worth mentioning once again. Well, not once again, but it's worth stating that I've already had this impression when I was in St. Louis, and I spoke at some point to Gary Kasparov, who is very, very involved in helping the efforts of Rex Singfield and the others there to promote chess, junior chess in particular. But I wanted to say that previous to, very close to the Olympiad, there was a World Junior Under 20, which was won with a round to spare by Jeffrey Chong. I don't know how to pronounce his name, and I apologize in advance because I'm pretty sure I mispronounced it. And he already is a tremendous player, and by 2018 I fully expect him to be a full-fledged member of that team. I have nothing but respect for both Shankland and Robson, but I think with Chong on the team, the US will be even more formidable than they are right now, and I think they're entering a very, very promising era, so to speak. They will be a huge force in every single team event they play for the foreseeable future, I think, because all of their team are youngsters. You probably have to consider Hikaru to be sort of an elder statesman there, and Hikaru is not that old. So, congratulations to the US if they won. Congratulations to the Ukrainians if they won. As I said, both of those results will feel perfectly deserved to me. They played the best chess, the best chess in this Olympiad. And with this, people are demanding I mention other fantastic results. I think Badur Jabava has to be mentioned. As usual, he seems to be almost single-handedly carrying the Georgian team to heights it on paper doesn't seem to necessarily belong to. This sounds a bit disrespectful. I don't mean any disrespect, but on paper, they're number 20 in the tournament, and in every single team tournament these days, you see them challenging at the top boards at least once during the event. And Badur continues playing his unique brand of chess as doing very, very well on first board. There's plenty of success stories during this Olympiad, and I will, there's no chance of me to mention them all, but in general, I think enough wrap up. There will be more official wrap up on the site later today, I'm sure, written by people who actually think before they speak, so you have that to look forward to. As for now, let's go back to playing chess and talking about it. Let me just switch to a different view. Hang on a sec. This should be better. And as usual, I'll be keeping an eye on chat. I haven't asked on Twitter for any specific requests. There have already been requests to continue playing the King's Indian with black, which I probably will do. But if you want to see something specific, I will read chat as much as possible. So mention stuff there, and I will try and oblige. Today's show will be slightly shorter. I won't do the 3 hours I've done on the past two occasions. I think this week I will try and do 3, and I will try to keep them to 2 hours in length, because it's more manageable, and also respect needs to be the schedule has to be respected. There are other people doing their shows on Chess24, and I can't occupy too much airtime. So people now are asking for more Grunfeld. There's now a fight back against my switch to the King's Indian. We'll see what happens. This is a line I used to play quite seriously with white, and then included in my black repertoire. Although generally not Bishop B4. Although Bishop B4 is perfectly playable, of course. When I decided to play this with black, I chose the more modern version, the one with the Bishop on E7 and B5 Bishop B7. I played 2 games in that line against Fabiano Caruana. I lost one in Stavanger, and another one was very painful despite ending in a draw. It was played in one of the European Club Cups, and my victory in that game, and I was very close to winning out of the opening there, would have meant our club would have won the European Club Cup. But the fact that I drew meant that we only tied for first, I think, and didn't win on tie breaks. I'm not sure if g4 is the most precise move here. I could start with king b1. I could start with a3 even. I'm fairly sure though that d6 is way too slow. d6 cannot possibly be fast enough in positions like this. And also, in Taimanov structures, it's quite unclear if black even wants to play d6, because in many positions it will just become a weakness with that white can play against. Bishop c5 is a correct move. After bishop a5, knight b3 would have been very, very strong. But even here, I think I can just start making progress on the king side, because I don't really see what black is doing. And I have knight takes e6 as an additional option to simplify in the center and put additional pressure on the d6 pawn later if I want to. Knight d5 comes to mind, at least putting, attacking the f3 pawn, creating some tactical threats I will need to address, but there are a reasonably comfortable way for white to address it. Yeah, I think I will take some pieces off here. Although actually now that I've done this, I'm less happy about my decision. I somehow assumed my opponent will take on e3 first, and that would be a mistake. I think I much prefer the move he has made, and objectively it might be best to take on c5 and go queen d6, and white does have, I think, a reasonably large advantage there. But it's a boring way to play, and I generally during these sessions try and not to do things which are boring, so it leaves me in a bit of a quandary here. This is very logical, but on the other hand it actually gives black I need to watch out for the counterplay with b5 b4, because I allowed b5 b4 now, which will open some files on the queen side. Luckily for me, if he goes b4, I can take on b4, he takes with the bishop, I play h6. And if black plays g6, I can play queen d4, attacking the bishop on b4 and forcing him to give up this bishop to avoid mate or losing the losing the piece. So that seems to work out fine for me. Whatever happened to this to the Sozin line in the Najdorf? Nothing really happened to it. I think to a degree it has been solved. That's sort of one level of answering it. And on it's very, very committal. I think the biggest problem with the Sozin is that in order to make it work, I think in many lines you will have to make a huge commitment, maybe even in terms of material, because many lines there are very sacrificial in nature. But there's nothing inherently wrong with the Sozin, and I got completely crushed by somebody playing the Sozin in one of the recent Banter Blitzes. This knight is a bit misplaced, and I think after e5, f5 I win material, so maybe black has to play f5. But after f5, there's a very, very pleasant choice for white. Many things seem to be very strong here. And once again, in our spirit of not doing things that are boring, that's kind of regrettable, because of course queen takes h1 was the most critical reply. Now I just win the rook and the game is over. But after e takes f5, I had to calculate queen takes h1, but I think I was winning there as well. This is just completely over now. Next move I just take on a8, and it's a case of I have an extra rook, but my position is better. Trying to look for new names, and it's becoming progressively difficult to find people I haven't played recently. I'm pretty sure I played Shellingford before, but maybe not in the last couple of Banters, so let's stick with that idea. I'll play one honorary Grunfeld, so to speak, and then we'll go back to the idea of playing the King's Indians. This is not supposed to be how you play the G3 systems, because I think you're not supposed to develop the knight to C3 so early. It actually makes winning back the C4 pawn a bit challenging for white, because of this little tactical detail. It has been reasonably well known for a while, but people still occasionally do this because they feel that there's no difference, you know, with which move order you choose to develop the bishop to g2. It actually does matter, and this is why you almost never see white playing g3 after developing the knight to c3. Gives black additional options, some of which are very attractive. There will be some compensation for white after both taking on d4, maybe queen b3 was also possible. The game is not over by any stretch, but it is a reasonably healthy extra pawn by move 10, which is something black generally aspires to. Seemingly people want me to play the Volga or Benko, and there's already a bit of a linguistics war going on in chat. It is, I mean, I was brought up with it being called the Volga Gambit, but Benko is a lot more common in the West. I might try playing the Benko later in the show, but I'm not a very proficient Benko player. As I mentioned, there is some compensation here. I still need some tempi to make this position easily convertible. Knight a4 in particular is something I'm trying to figure out just how annoying that is, and whether I actually need to play against it. Knight d4 for some reason was worrying me less. I'm not sure if I was correct on that subject or not. The bishop on a6 looks a bit weird, but it will get out of there. I also, I think, created a positional threat of knight d3, which might be very useful if it's allowed. Like so. Although knight takes c6 might be a good idea here. I should probably have considered it for a bit longer. Because I thought knight c6, yeah, that's the issue. With the rook on d1, I thought I was winning a lot of material here, but with the rook on d2, after knight f4, knight d8, I'm much less certain I'm doing as well as I wanted. Yeah, that was a reasonably large misplay by me. I should not have done that. And now if I go knight c5, he can take on c6, and after rook c8, there is this move knight d5, which I just spotted, and which might be incredibly annoying, because there's really no comfortable way to avoid that fork on e7. So I actually have to make this very awkward move rook c8, which allows knight a4. So all in all, the developments of the last couple of moves make white's position perfectly serviceable, maybe even slightly better. Which is unfortunate, considering how good my position was to begin with. Why aren't you playing the Grunfeld anymore? I am still playing the Grunfeld. I am playing less Grunfeld in these Banter sessions. That is true. Mainly because I feel it was becoming a bit repetitive. And I want to challenge myself a bit more. This, I think, is a blunder, and now I think I'm winning again. No, that's a mistake, but rook c3 was maybe playable. Please don't flag me. Seriously? Okay, I promised to stop begging. I actually made that solemn promise in one of the earlier shows. Actually, even after knight d3, I said I was winning, but in fact, after rook c3, game very much continues, because I can't win the material. I can't win the material, at least not right away. And yeah, there was no need for drastic measures here. I could have just continued playing calmly. Bishop a5 maybe is a move, but maybe the whole placement of the bishop on a6, it was kind of predicated on the fact that I thought I could play knight d3 later, and if knight d3 doesn't work, the whole plan maybe is slightly flawed. But the biggest takeaway is don't do it with this move order, and if you do, I think you kind of need to give the check on a4 here and recapture this pawn straight away, because black might not be so kindly inclined later. Please can you say something regarding playing a4 in response to a6 in Benoni? It's too general a question to try and cover without the board, I think. I think it's more or less impossible to say anything meaningful on that subject if we don't have a board present, because I think it's very much case by case. And in some positions you will, in some positions you won't. I think in most cases, white will end up playing a4 against a6. I think cases where it's not needed are a lot rarer, but yeah, I'm not the world's biggest Benoni expert to begin with, and secondly, it's too general of a question. If I play knight f3 here, there's this line bishop takes d2, and if queen takes d2, there's knight e4 followed by queen b4 check, which is actually a bit awkward to me, somewhat surprisingly, which is why I'm considering some weird moves here. Trying to figure out if a3 is a horrible move, for instance, or e3. Let's try e3. Maybe develop the knight to e2. I will aim for 2800 blind dragon, but I don't know if I will get there. I should probably pay less attention to chat during games if I really want to aim for a higher rating, but that feels counterproductive, because chat interaction is actually it's slowly becoming the most fun way, the most fun part of these banters, because it does feel like you know, I'm doing this for live people out there who pay attention, who are interested in what I'm doing, and not just staring at the screen and clicking on pieces. Have I played blindfold chess on the internet? No, I don't believe I have. I played in a reasonably large number of Monaco tournaments, so I played quite a bit of live blindfold chess, so to speak, but not on the internet. 2800 in feeder rating would be awesome. Yeah, that would be nice, but the summer I've had means that this goal is quite a long way away right now. Yeah, e5 is very natural, and now I need to settle on some sort of a plan. I think I will start by... I wonder if I need to actually play against black playing e5, e4. I will start by playing h3. It's a bit of a weird move, but in many positions later in the game, I want to have the option of playing g4 and knight g3. And I'm starting my preparations for that straight away. Let's say if he goes e4 here, I think g4 might be a very, very decent reply to it. Something like bishop f5 followed by taking on d4 and playing knight e4 is a sensible way to proceed for black here. I will do it even without the pawn on e4. It's less clear if it's good, but I'm still very attracted to this restructuring because the knight on e2 wasn't really doing very much. I read some Ian McEwan, but not as much as I would like to have read it. What I read I enjoyed quite a bit. My plan here is to play f4. Rook e1 is kind of required to prevent him from playing, let's say, e takes d4 here and queen e3 check. I don't want the queens coming off. I want to start, as direct an attack on the king side as possible, and for that to have the most effect, of course, the queens need to stay on. So far I'm gaining a lot of space, but not really creating any concrete threats against the king. But gaining a lot of space is good in itself. I know you're not mainly a d4 player, but what will you do versus g6, bishop g7 and immediate c5? I think these move orders generally lead to Maratsi structures. It's very difficult for black to avoid allowing some sort of a Maratsi structure if you do that. And those structures are not to everyone's taste. I mean, some people like it and some people play it well, but I think in general it's not everyone's cup of tea. And rook f1, once again, it's the same reasoning. I don't want pieces coming off. I couldn't stop one pair of rooks being exchanged, but I'm definitely not giving my opponent easy trades if I can avoid them. And now I've achieved sort of initial maximum saturation, so to speak, and I need to think about either bringing more pieces to the attack or maybe sacrificing something, because I need to break through somehow here, and I haven't spotted a way to do it yet. I would like to play h5 and g6, but currently with the queen on d8 I cannot play h5 because the pawn on g5 is hanging. I'm not sure what this knight is doing there, but I think it's, at the very least, it has very high nuisance value. And this probably allows mate. This kind of helps me because it gives me this opportunity which did not exist before. By doing this I only sacrifice one piece, but I force black to exchange all the things which were guarding his king, and now queen h6 just follows against anything, and I think this is just mate. Yeah, this doesn't actually stop my bigger threat. People for some reason criticizing h4. Let's see. Let's try and see why. Maybe I had something concrete here. But I don't really see what. I could play maybe knight d5 hitting the pawn on c7, but playing h4 in this structure makes a lot of sense because it makes it harder to blunder the g5 pawn later on. I mean, the reasoning was frankly this simple, and it's never a hugely bad idea just to keep your pawns connected. What's my take on the current German team? I don't really have a settled opinion on the subject, so perhaps I should refrain from speaking because I might say something stupid. But it looks decent. There are some youngsters coming up, and there's also some experienced players still playing. Livio Dieter on board 1 is, I guess, the most recent development, and I have the greatest respect for Livio Dieter. I should play something I have not played on stream. Jobava actually played this against Paco in the Olympiad, and here he played knight e8. Knight e4 is the old way, so to speak, but I'm less worried about that. Badur went for this really weird newish setup with the knight on e8, allowing h4, h5. It was a really wild game, during which I think Paco, it began by Paco being a great deal better. But in the tactical complications later in the game, Badur came out on top. I think I'm playing this a little bit too slowly, but I didn't want to allow bishop g4, because if the bishop actually lands on g4, it makes it a lot easier for black to challenge the white center. But I think now c4, bishop e6. As a Grunfeld player, I think I'd be very, very happy here with black. So my play immediately out of the opening here should probably be criticized. Just nowhere near fast enough here. And also, I told myself knight c4 will be annoying, and then played bishop a3 anyway, which is not, the prescribed way of dealing with potential problems. Just not a very good move, bishop a3, frankly. But I already sort of disliked my position by then, and yeah, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do now, because if the bishop goes along the a3, f8 diagonal, there's knight b2 as an option, and also the bishop can be chased quite successfully by a5 and b6, and bishop c1 is incredibly miserable to play, although I gave this whole speech during last week's show about not being afraid to admit to your mistake and just make a move backwards to the square where the piece came from. Most of all, I just wish I haven't played bishop a3, to be honest. It's just a stupid move. Let's see if I can make this work. I have a feeling I probably should not. Wow. That is a truly horrible idea, and I just realized why. I wanted to meet rook c8 with bishop c5, but that just loses to rook takes c5 and queen takes d3. This kind of lets me off the hook a little bit. My original intention was to play knight c4, queen a4, but that runs into b5, which is why I switched to queen c1. But queen c1, rook c8 would have given black a huge advantage, I think. I'm not better here by any stretch, but this is now a playable position for white, I think. Especially if I will manage to somehow win the fight for the c-file. Bishop takes c4 and d5 may have been a good try, but even if let's say if black takes on d5 with the queen, and we trade the d4 pawn for the e7 pawn, maybe in the position I found myself in, it was the best outcome I could have hoped for. but it's still not a cheerful outcome for white, so I didn't really want to do that. Okay, now I need to give this some thought, because I might actually try and fight for advantage here if I'm careful. Because I can play rook c1, and it's not that easy for black to smoke that rook out. And if it sticks, if it becomes one of those fabled stickable minions, it will create problems for black. I'm aiming for the f4 square here, because the f7 pawn now is currently the black's biggest problem. But still, it's not that easy to prove that I have anything here. If I go knight g5, he can play queen takes d4 and queen d1 check. I think I should still do this, and then I should play rook c8. I don't have a fully formed opinion on the Bogo Indian. The Bogo Indian is definitely playable, but it's not an opening I know particularly well, so it's hard for me to say anything specific. I mean, it's very solid. It's maybe, as the original poster said, it might be a little bit passive, but it's very solid and very, very playable, and lots of players have it as part of their repertoire for the games where they don't feel obliged to, you know, immediately go for all three results. And actually these types of openings are sometimes, you know, very deceptive, because it's very easy for white to overreach, and then you can suddenly start developing plenty of counterplay. My next tournament will start in a week and a half. I will play in a Tal Memorial in Moscow, starting on the 25th, I think. The opening ceremony, I believe, is on the 25th of September. Continuing with the same theme, I think I won't be returning to the Grunfeld for a while. I studied this very, very seriously before the London candidates, but not since then. And then I studied it from the white side. And this will be a lot of fun, because basically it will be less fun if he goes knight d2 here, which is a perfectly normal move. But this is, of course, my game against Alexander Grishuk from the London candidates, in which I played f4, which is the reason e6 was supposed to be a bad move in those years. And Alexander surprised me with knight takes c4 and b5, which is one of the more stunning... Oops, sorry. Scrolling problems resurface once again. It's one of the most stunning opening novelties I've seen in my life, and definitely the most striking novelty ever to have been played against me in a tournament game, especially considering the stakes of the tournament. h3 is way too slow, and also it's not something you do in these structures, because it actually weakens your king side. It creates targets for the black pieces to try and exploit later in the game. Although, I mean, the point is, of course, that my opponent wants to play f4 next move, so it's not that ridiculous. But it feels very slow. And, you know, you immediately, when you see a move as seemingly inconsequential as this, you immediately start looking for ways to punish it straight away. But so far I'm coming up short. I can't see a direct refutation. If I play rook e8, he probably will play knight g2. But then I have knight h5, knight g3. Let's start with... I can also start with e5, cd5, rook e8, which is the I guess, the sanest option, but it also is a bit... it feels a bit pedestrian. But the problem with rook e8 connected with the same idea that Grishuk played against me. If you imagine the position, I play rook e8, he goes f4, I take on c4, he takes with the bishop, I play b5, he takes with the bishop on b5, and suddenly this rook is hanging. And this is annoying and not something I want to allow. Okay, let's do the boring thing. It's not really boring. I'm using this word very, very liberally today. But it's the most sensible approach. Open the e-file for now. Create potential tactical ideas in the center. Also ask white. Okay, you've played h3. What's your next move? Do you really feel brave enough to play f4 here, for instance? It might not lose. I can't actually see how it's refuted. I feel, you know, this urge to sacrifice something at every move here. It's driving me mad. It's driving me absolutely insane. I don't know. I can't just stop myself. I want to play this just to win a tempo and open the b-file. It's also, he continues kind of wanting to play f4, so I want to have the c4 square for the knight here. But mainly I'm just doing this to open the b-file and have a tempo. Okay, so this is the position. Also, if he takes on b5 with the bishop, I wanted to play bishop d7, which also probably drives the bishop back to e2. Now, it's 2 moves later, we have sort of the same position, but we have the b-file open, and f4 becomes even more of a risky proposition for white. But I still have no direct threats, which is the issue. If he goes f4 here, I will start by taking rook takes b2, and then I will start calculating. That's my plan against f4. A very, very brave person might consider castling long here, but I don't believe it can work. The thing about whoops, I'm sorry. Yeah, I need to take the finger off the scrolling wheel. The thing about white's position here is that it's kind of difficult to make moves. That's the biggest issue he has. And I think rook takes b2 might be an actual threat. I'm not sure, but I think it might be. Also, bishop a6 is, you know, it's a lot more mundane, but might also be a very, very strange, strong move that white needs to contend with. After rook b1, sadly, I think I have to go for plan B. If he went after knight h2, I think rook b2 was a crushing idea. But here, I think sadly I have to play bishop a6. It's a very strong idea though, because now if he takes, knight d3 and knight c4 becomes almost unstoppable, and if he doesn't take, I have a feeling there will be some tactics connected with some knight jumps somewhere. This cannot possibly work. But I need to probably start playing faster, which might lead me astray. Rook takes b2 is interesting, but I'm not sure if it's that great. I can just play c4, but once again, it feels a bit slow. Let's go for this. I mean, it's an interesting try, even if I'm not entirely convinced it's winning. Or even that great, to be honest. But I mean, there definitely will be compensation, but I'm not sure it's objectively the best move in the position. I only speak Russian and English. What is the lowest rated opponent I ever lost to? I played the World Open in Philadelphia in '95, and in that tournament I believe I played and lost to a gentleman who was below 2000, I think. Wasn't my best ever tournament. I really want to play knight takes d5, but I can't calculate it to a win. And I really need to speed up here. Sadly, I don't think this works, which is very annoying to me. It's a very beautiful idea, but if he actually calls my bluff and takes on d5, I don't think this works. After king f1, I don't have a good jump. Now king g1, I'm good against king g1. My opponent kind of bailed me out there a little bit. And my sort of semi-bluffing strategy will I think come off in this game, but had he played the more precise move, I really wasn't sure at all what I was doing there. Here my knight on f4 is such a monster, and the pawn on d3 is so strong. In this position, I mean, if I don't get flagged, this position is quite easily winning for black. Oh, I forgot about knight c1 completely. Yeah, that was horribly, horribly misplayed. Seems like I'm playing someone who is even slower than I am, which is weird. Okay, that's unfortunate, because I really probably at some point should have stopped talking. And also I once again I think lost a position where I had 3 seconds against 1, which is not something you do normally. But yeah, if I just switch to just playing chess somewhere around here, I probably could have saved myself some time. And the issue with this is if he goes king f1, I have 2 knight jumps which look interesting, knight f4 and knight c1, but after knight f4 he can just take, and in this position there is no way for me to attack too many pieces. I can play queen a4, but rook c4 covers everything sufficiently. And if I go knight c1, I think queen e1 might be the only move that wins, but I couldn't see how I continue from here. If he goes queen d1, I think I can take on e3 with the queen and then play bishop d4, and this might be very, very strong. But after queen e1, I don't see how I although maybe rook e3 works. Rook e3 and then queen d3 check, and this might be quite good for black. So maybe my combination wasn't so ridiculous. And yeah, this position, somehow I kind of stopped thinking here because I felt that I'm in complete control, but actually I should be a lot faster here. Rook d1, knight c1 is a very fast and effective plan. Should not have lost that game, but that's the way things are. Why not queen g2 in the final position? Short moves always best. That is actually kind of correct. Yeah, I should implement more of those strategies, but somehow I always forget to. People asking me to play chess explained, I think. I don't actually know anything about Anton Smirnov from Australia. Sorry, I can't really be of any help on that subject. At least I assume that this is what CE stands for. I don't know if any other CEs. This is a bit slow. To be honest, I don't really like what I'm doing here, because I will sort of run out of plans, and the fact that black already got f5 and knight f6 in is quite attractive. I didn't see the draw offer, I would have taken it. I don't really like those clicking contests, F Bardamu. Sorry about that. I did offer a draw, but when you refused, I did not see the return offer. Black should be very, very comfortable here. Generally, I think it's a decent setup. I've had occasion to study a little bit these reasonably new systems where black just plays early knight c6, bishop c5, then a6, bishop a7 against the English, and plays for precisely these types of very sharp positions. Hikaru Nakamura in particular has been doing this quite seriously at a very high level, and yeah, it's an interesting, reasonably fresh idea against the English, which you might find very playable if you're looking for a system to try against the English, which is not as well studied as the usual stuff. This is, I think, quite a decent alternative to the standard theory. "10 more Olympiads for Torre is not crazy," says Ivan Chucky. No, I think 10 more will be stretching it a little bit. I seem to have tricked my opponent here a little bit, because I emerge out of this semi-forced sequence with a healthy extra pawn, and also the Horowitz bishops, as we were taught to call them in our youth. And the g7, h7 pawns will be under a tremendous amount of pressure here. I might even, it feels like I'm switching to a technical side of the force, so to speak. But in fact, I'm opening the h-file. I think this might be the most direct way to play against the black king side. And of course, if I'm given a full queen, I will pick it up. Another 7 Olympiads for Eugenio will mean another 15 years of playing in the Olympiads, and I think he will be into the high 70s by then. I think that's unlikely. Much as I admire his performance in Baku, I think that's unlikely. I think playing chess professionally, and by this I mean really professionally, as the only source of income, so to speak, is a very, very hard thing to pull off. And when the question sort of semi-arose for my own children, I checked briefly, saw no particular interest in them for the game, and sort of breathed a sigh of relief, and never really came back to that subject. I don't discourage children from studying chess, not at all, but in fact I think the push to include chess in school curriculums is a good thing. But by the same token, it's an incredibly hard occupation to make your own, and there are far easier ways to make a living than chess. Have I ever played the Albin counter gambit in a classical game? No, I don't believe I have. Although maybe Morozevich once played it against me. I'm not sure. I do only play premium users. This is how Banter Blitz sessions work. There have to be some perks to becoming a premium user at the website, and this is one of them. That's a weird choice. I actually quite liked is maybe strong, but I thought if he takes with the knight and then the bishop, I thought his compensation for the exchange might be quite decent. Why he would choose to keep the 2 knights instead of 2 bishops is slightly mystifying for me. In general, I think my opponent, he either wasn't aware of this trick with queen a4 check and knight b5 that I employed here, or maybe he mixed up his move orders somewhere, but this, I think, in many cases in the Slav, this is something you need to watch out for when you play the rook a7 lines. I think it's reasonably safe for me to even castle here, but I will invest in an additional tempo to just take the sting out of black's counterplays completely. And no knight e4s now, no knight g4s. None of these moves will be possible from now on. And then I can just safely castle and continue with my conversion. Bishop b4 is now a huge threat, which actually wins more material. No, I actually do answer questions in chat from non-premium members, which is probably not in keeping with company policy, but it's harder for me to, in a wall of text, it's harder for me to differentiate. So that's a bit of a workaround. And now it's a full rook, so that should be good enough. So let's see if C actually is there. It's always good to get a bit of a internal competition going. I don't actually play much online blitz on the site apart from the Banter sessions, because well, life takes precedence basically, and I sort of gave up on online blitz in general a long time ago as a kind of a competitive pastime, and I'm not going to change my opinion on that. I mean, compared to the recent crop, I'm simply not fast enough, and I watched the duels some of you may have seen between I mean, Magnus and the rest of them played this. The semifinals just finished, where Magnus played Grishuk, and MVL played Nakamura, and yeah, that speed is no longer really possible for me. Will I be in New York for the World Championship? I think it's unlikely. I considered myself maybe a bit of an outside chance for the commentator gig for that thing, but I've heard nothing from the organizers, and I think it's safe to assume that if had they wanted me there, I would have heard something by now. I think I'm misplaying this quite badly. I quite like my opponent's position now. I'm pretty sure I should have had a much safer position. I would like to play b4 straight away, but I'm kind of late on this. I would like my rook to be already on a2 in this position. But maybe I can push the a-pawn and force him into some concessions. I'll start with rook a5 because I think this creates the biggest uncertainty for chess explained here. And here already I have a choice. I can play a7, take on b5 and take on c4, and I will have a healthy extra pawn. But I'm already kind of looking for more, but maybe I shouldn't. I think this has to be enough for now. The Benko is probably a sound opening, although it requires a lot of work, which I haven't really done in my life. So, what will I do when I retire? Chess commentator or coach? Or I'm definitely, well, I mean, as definite as anything can be in this life. I don't fancy chess politics. I don't want to be involved in chess politics. So I don't really envisage anything for myself along those lines. But coaching is very possible, and I'm pretty sure I will do a serious amount of commentary work, at least to begin with, because it seems like something that I can do to a reasonable standard, and something people, you know, seem to enjoy listening to. Is Sicilian Dragon dead and buried at the top level? No, I don't think it is. I think it's not as fashionable as it was when Rajabov and then even Carlsen made it for a brief period, but no, it's not dead and buried. It's just a difficult opening to learn. This is a good move, which I for some reason missed, although it seems very natural. I don't really understand why I would miss it. And it kind of makes me want to take on c5, but that will give black tremendous drawing chances, and yeah, it makes my life very awkward, actually. Very, very awkward. What do the World Cup contenders expect from their seconds, considering everybody has powerful engines? I think it's probably less true than it was, and it's becoming less and less true as time goes on, because the engines do become stronger and stronger. But it's still true to a reasonable extent that machines still need human operators to generate ideas. Machines still need guidance in the early part of the work, where you need to decide which positions to look at, what direction you want to take in those positions, and so on. And this is where seconds come in. Bishop g4 is interesting on one level and kind of tricky on the other, because I'm also allowing some kind of knight d3 shenanigans, at least in the future. But I kind of need this move. But then the rook will just go somewhere. It's weird that this is... I mean, it really looked like my position should be completely winning at one point, but maybe it simply wasn't. Oops, sorry. I quite like this move as well. He's defending really well. I'm really impressed by the way he's been holding this position together. I mean, if I take on c5 twice, it just doesn't feel very attractive somehow. But I think I have to. It's really unfortunate, because it feels like I'm... And I also missed rook a4, which is a very strong intermediary move. I don't know why I've gone so far with the... I mean, it makes some sense, because now the e4 pawn will not be hanging, but I'm still not sure this is so great. But yeah, coming back to the engine question, I still feel engines require quite a decent amount of guidance, because in many positions they don't really catch on very early on. I'm temporarily giving up the g5 pawn here, but I think I'm breaking through if he no, I don't. He could actually have taken that, which may be a bit of a turning point in this game, because now I managed to stabilize to a degree and also create maybe some threats. I'm not sure what rook c1 is all about, though. It feels a bit vague. Rook a1 was maybe more concrete. These types of positions are not easy to win at all. And I thought I could play d6 here, but I can't really. Might be holdable for black. If he forces me to play d6, and I don't have an immediate victory after that, it will be very, very hard for me to convert this. This is a bit of a bait. I wanted to force the rook to come to c2 and then push d6. I'm not sure this is so great, but I think it creates, you know, the biggest amount of problems for my opponent. And, you know, if I force him to do this, then my position has to be... Whoops. Actually, this is not a bad move. And I'm not sure this is a draw. He seems to think this is a draw, but it might not be. Whoops, I should not have left this this unprotected. It might be a draw now. Or not. I'm not 100% convinced this is a draw, actually. Probably isn't now. Yeah, that was not a particularly good conversion, but he defended really, really well, because when I won the b5 pawn, somewhere here I thought I should be winning quite easily technically, but he actually got it to a point where I thought objectively the position might be closer to a draw than to a white victory. So well played. Well played by my opponent, but I prevailed in the time scramble somehow, which is not the usual course my games take, but it will still happen occasionally. What are my thoughts on the birds opening? I actually played it once in a serious game against Dmitry Yakovenko because I ran out of ideas. I didn't want to play the Berlin. I didn't want to play any kind of an English or English-like structures, because I tried that against him and didn't really get anywhere. And then I thought maybe I can put all the hours I spent studying the Dutch to use, and I played the birds against him, and I actually had an advantage, quite a serious advantage at some point in the game, but it had nothing to do with the opening. The opening is fine, but you kind of forfeit your right to advantage straight away, and you get a playable position and you play. Yeah, my thoughts on the comparison between the proper Berlin and the anti-Berlin positions. It's you know, I generally say it's too depressing a subject to cover properly. I personally, you know, for me personally, it's quite obvious that anti-Berlins offer me a better chance of success than Berlins, because I really no longer really am in any kind of touch with the Berlin endgame proper. Not that I was ever a huge exponent of it from the white side, but I'm probably misplaying the Petrosian as well. I'm not sure I needed to play d5 so early there. And this now lands me in a situation which I probably should not have been in. I think I played, I've never played one e3, but I played one a3 followed by e5, e3 against, I think that was Fritz, or maybe Junior. There was a tournament in Frankfurt, a round-robin tournament, rapid tournament, double round, in which there were 7 very strong grandmasters, and one of the earlier versions of, I think it was Junior. And with black I lost some Grunfeld against the machine. And then we started discussing amongst ourselves, so to speak, amongst the players in the tournament. We started discussing how to tackle the machine with white, and people came up with this idea of playing a3, e5, e3, so as we were pretty sure a3 was still in the opening book. But we thought if after a3, e5 we continue giving up the center and continue giving it opportunities to occupy the center by playing e3, it might then be slightly out of book, and it might sort of gravitate towards positions which are not advantageous for it. And this is what happened. I got people in this chat will laugh quite hard at this, but I got an excellent version of the French with an extra tempo with white, and I won that game reasonably convincingly. I misplayed this King's Indian though quite badly, because for some reason, in my head, I kind of counted knight takes e4, knight takes e4 as being played. And then I can play bishop d3, and I quite like my position, but... And also hg5, I kind of included as already being on the board, which is also not true. And now I think I'm in a very serious amount of trouble, because I'm barely hanging on in the center here. If he takes on h4, I will have to give up the g2 pawn, but I'm actually quite calm about that prospect, because at least I will castle long, and then I will have the g file to create some counterplay. But knight hf6, for instance, worries me a great deal, because the whole edifice might collapse. Is there a reason why I don't play the Berlin myself? First and foremost, before I go on a slightly amusing rant on the subject, I have to say it probably isn't a particularly good fit for me, because the qualities that successful Berlin players exhibit are not necessarily my qualities. It requires, very decent understanding of which structures to aim for and which not to aim for. It requires patience in defense. It requires, all the things I can do if I'm forced to, but I don't particularly enjoy doing. This is a very, very sad choice, but I don't really see how I can avoid it. And this has to be quite bad. But mainly, I mean, it's no surprise that this is going sort of in this direction, because I just misplayed the opening quite horribly at some point. And I'm also down to 27 seconds. I think I will not cheat anyone out of anything if I just resign here, but on the other hand, it feels a bit weak to resign in a position like this. And voila, my opponent explains on the board why resigning is never preferable to playing on. Young Russian talent to follow. The first name that's a good move. The first name that comes to mind is probably Artemiev. Rook h3 actually wins here. And I will be very... Oh, why have you done this? That would have been such a nice way to finish the game. And now I can sort of claim I was flagged, even though I really wasn't. Yeah, that was very well played by my opponent, and somewhere here, for instance, if he starts with bishop g4 here, I can just resign, because then bishop h6 check, rook f8, I'm a pawn down, the h5 pawn is, a very strong passer I can't really do very much about, and I also had like 20 seconds left. So it's kind of regrettable. He spoiled a very, very well played by him game by him by mixing up the move order and giving me this opportunity. Yeah, I'm pretty slow. I don't know why I keep on doing this against the Alekhine. I should just play knight f3 like a normal human being. But somehow I see knight f6, knight d5, and when it's a game on the internet, in real life in tournaments I've always played knight f3 and I've always done well, but on the internet my mouse sort of is immediately reaching for the c2 pawn. It's some kind of a nervous tick. I don't really understand. I'm not sure if that was just my mistake, right? In this position I'm supposed to play bishop b3, not knight f3. I was wondering why the bishop is on g4 when it normally doesn't get to g4. It's normally on f5, which is a lot easier to deal with for the white side. And I was kind of staring at the position, trying to figure out why I don't like my position so much. And then I realized it's mainly to do with the fact that I mixed up my move orders. And now if he takes and goes bishop h4 check, I will have to go on a king run. King d1, king c2. It's not that horrible though. I mean, it's awkward, but it's not that horrible, because my center for the time being is reasonably solid, especially if I support it with f3, f4. And if I get all of my moves in, king c2, rook d1, king b1, it means that I'm sort of castled kingside, and not that much will be lost. Although I mean, all of this is kind of predicated on my center actually holding. I might have to play c5 here, just to try and force him to play knight d5 so that I can close the d-file. And then king c2 will be a lot safer to play. The King's Indian is definitely viable. It will continue being viable, I think, for as long as chess exists. It's just I keep on returning to this theme. It's an opening which has a very, very high entrance price, so to speak. The amount of studying required to play the King's Indian well, especially at top level, especially against good opposition, is a lot higher than, let's say, something like the Nimzo. Because in the Nimzo, you will occasionally be worse. But in the King's Indian, especially if you play the most principled lines everywhere, you will just flat out lose some games if you are not booked up sufficiently and if you don't understand what you're doing sufficiently. A very long question. I will not read the entirety of, asking me whether I think repeating a computer line from start to finish is a form of plagiarism. I don't think it is. I don't think it is. Although, yes, it does feel... I mean, it's a great feeling because generally it's your homework, so it's it's a return on your own investment, your time investment, and your effort that went into finding this novelty and perfecting it to such an extent that you actually win the game without making a move over the board. But also, it's I mean, it's a very modern phenomenon, and I still wouldn't call it plagiarism, but it's difficult to describe. But also, I don't think very many of games of the century. There was a mention of games of the century and so on, and maybe if those games should be marked specifically. I don't think too many of those games actually make it to those lists. Off the top of my head, I think there was a game between Jobava and Bareev years ago in one of the European Club Cups where, if I'm not mistaken, where Jobava won a tremendously exciting game in some mainline Caracan, where he found a piece sacrifice somewhere on move 20, and he had it analyzed until move 40 or so. And he was blitzing more or less the whole way through. But apart from that game, and even in that game, he actually needed to start thinking at a certain point. Apart from that, none really come to mind. Have I ever commentated with Nigel Short, and how was it? I can't remember off the top of my head if I ever have, but it would have been fine. I mean, we're still very good friends, and I think we'd be very comfortable working with each other. I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. I could have won the a5 pawn. I mean, the huge parts of this game are going uncommented on, but that's probably because the chat is so active. I should probably strike some kind of a balance on that subject. I don't know what Queen G8 is all about, though. What is this? Why is this happening? This is very confusing to me. I don't understand what this is. Why is this queen on h8? Yeah, Aronian Anand in the Semislav, that actually is a good spot. That game was very, very heavily analyzed by Levon and his team. But even there, he needed to start playing at some point. That actually explains what the queen is doing on h8. For some reason, I thought I'm actually breaking through here, which is a weird mind bug. And now I don't really have anything at all, because it's very easy for black to blockade himself here, and I don't know if I can make any progress. The king just stands on e6, and it makes black's position is just very, very solid. My idea was to meet king e6 with c6, but this is even simpler. This is just fine for black. Black might actually be slightly better, maybe. But definitely not worse. Bishop a6 is a threat right now, which is which went unnoticed by my opponent, so I guess I will win this game, but all in all, I haven't really covered myself in glory here. It was at some point a very nice position, which I played way too slowly, and allowed my opponent to consolidate. Let's play somebody somewhat lower rated. Include that in the segment. Whoops. Clicking not up to par as usual. We've got about half an hour left in this show. I'll try and squeeze as much as possible in that half an hour. And apologies for the technical issues. We've had 2 shows in a row where we had none whatsoever. So I guess it was too much to hope for that today will also go smoothly, and we'll have no internet glitches or anything of that sort. I don't really know what I'm doing in this line, regrettably. I know it's playable for black, but I think it's useful here to actually know the move orders. And there's very little chance of me being able to work them out in real time. So I'm playing fast, sort of hoping to wing it, so to speak. But it's not a line where winging it is generally a successful strategy, because you start off by investing a c-pawn for dynamic compensation, and if your dynamic compensation is way too slow to appear, you will end up just in an endgame where you're a pawn down. My general repertoire against the Zemish in the King's Indian, when I was playing the King's Indian seriously, and that was 15 years ago or so, maybe even more, has always been the knight c6 a6 group of systems. So my knowledge of this stuff is, well, non-existent. Knight b5 looks like a very decent move. I probably should have played a5 even earlier, but now I feel like a5 connected with knight b4 might be my only source of potential counterplay, which is a sad state of affairs. How about the game against Jan at the beginning of his show and end of mine? That would require some level of coordination, which I'm not sure I'm capable of at the moment, because I'm struggling to juggle things properly, even without trying to contact him on Skype or WhatsApp or what have you, and trying to arrange that. Although it does sound like an interesting idea. Is knight c7 hang on a second, this actually allows me to win the pawn back. This was probably a bit miscalculated by my opponent. And now my position is perfectly fine suddenly, which it really shouldn't have been. Please don't frighten me. I get everything green from my side. Is the stream actually down? Please tell me, chat. Please don't scare me like this, because, you know, I'm old and infirm, and when people tell me stream is down, I take them very seriously. I think, you know, it looks drawish, but I think in fact I have a huge advantage, maybe close to winning advantage, because I think I get the b3 check in, and then the pawn on b2 actually gets collected. Although maybe he is in time with bishop b2, bishop d1, which would be sad from my viewpoint. Yeah, I think he is in time. This is very regrettable. I thought I was just winning. Maybe I am. Almost played g6, g5 because I'm so fond of misclicks. Bishop takes b3, I collect the rook on h1, which is something I finally managed to spot after some thought. And if he takes on b2, it has to be completely winning for me somehow. Yeah, I managed to swindle myself out of this, but I'm pretty sure this is not how you treat this opening. And even here, I suspect my position is not that great. But then my opponent just, I think, forgot that I can give up this bishop on a6 and collect on a2. And from that moment forward, it was sort of one-way traffic. No, bishop b3, knight c3 is not mate. Bishop b3, knight c3 loses for black, because there's king c2. That would be a bit of a mistake from my side. But bishop b3, rook a1 check, rook takes h1, and then bishop d4. That wins for black. So we do get, I think, confirmation that the US won the open section, and China, I forgot to mention that completely, but it was a very hard-fought Olympiad in the women's section, I think, and no team really exerted complete dominance until the last couple of rounds. But the Chinese, led by Hou Yifan, finally were too strong for everyone. And today they've beaten the Russian team today, and our girls, I think, needed to win the match, and maybe even +1 would have been enough for Russia to win the gold on tiebreaks, but China won that match, and I think Russia, despite playing on board 1 today, will end up not winning any medals at all, which is, of course, a huge setback for a team which won, I believe, the last 3 Olympiads. Fradedi is asking, are the bishop b4 systems in the c4a5 English okay to play? The results of Vichy in the candidates were alarming, to put it mildly, but I think the system is still perfectly fine to play. He just kept on running into some weird turbulence, going for lines he did not repeat before the game, perhaps, and running into dangerous novelties, which objectively are not refuting anything, but in one game you might struggle. This game seems not to be starting, and I'm not making the same mistake I did during the last stream, where I aborted the game, where I failed to make the first move with white. So we'll give it another 3 seconds and try and look for somebody else. What line do I think is the best against the Reti? I'm not that sure, but I think the classical Reti is supposed to be quite fine for black if you just play c4, d4 and go for the main lines. But it's another of those questions which are, without putting it on the board and going through lines one by one, I think is very, very difficult to cover. Is there a special reason for the fact that the graph variation has fallen out of fashion in the Ruy Lopez? If by the graph variation you mean the Chigorin with knight d7, people still play it, and I don't know if it has been refuted, to be honest. I'm not sure it has been. But it is, I mean, I think there's a... you've sort of answered your own question by using the word fashion. These things come and go. Let's say you see a lot less Petrov right now than you would have, I don't know, 5-10 years ago specifically, I mean especially 10. And I honestly don't know why this is. No one has, to my knowledge, done anything to make the Petrov any less viable as an opening for black. But it's not gone exactly. There's still a reasonable amount of it being played, but nowhere near as much as it has been. And I seem to have played myself into a bit of a weird spot here, because I couldn't remember what you're supposed to do against knight c2, and now before next move is... A very annoying threat. I think I was supposed to go knight f6 so that I could have knight g4 as a response to c3 later. And now it's very, very awkward for me. I mean, I might have to play b4. And that is one ugly move to make. But I don't see any alternatives, because if I allow b4, I simply don't like my position at all. Because the queen side will come under tremendous pressure immediately, b4 followed by a4. And also tactically the bishop on c5 will be hanging in a lot of lines. I think Jan is probably correct on the subject of 5 knight c3. It's not 4 knight c3, it's 5 knight c3. He probably is right on that subject, but it's only part of the explanation. You know, it can't be the full story there. Are there any great chess players that you think are constantly overlooked? For me, the great English I am Lawrence Trent springs to mind. Well played, sir. Well played, sir. We need more of those types of questions. But on a slightly more serious note, I don't think it's possible to overlook the great English I am Lawrence Trent. He's everywhere. I think you'd have to work very, very hard to completely overlook him. My plan here is to play queen a8 and then go for... I mean, I want to try and force him to play e4, e5 here. Which I think will make my life simpler. But I'm not sure. And also, yeah, I was about to say, it's possible that I completely blundered knight takes e6, which will be... regrettable. But it seems like I will not be punished as drastically as I could have been in some other lines, because I am winning the e4 pawn back. I have to... I mean, if I take with the knight, he takes, and then he plays queen g3, and it becomes quite dangerous, I think. So I suspect I will have to do it this way. This loses me the a6 pawn, but I will get some compensation for it. Yeah, I would very much like to already have a pawn on h6 here, because then I could play knight d5, and I would think that maybe I'm even better. But I don't have time for that. This is a little bit of a trap though, because if he takes on f6, I think rook b2 is very strong. And this is definitely way too optimistic. You can't play like this. You need to pay attention to your opponent's threats. Now he absolutely must play rook f2. Actually, it's not that horrible for him, sadly. Maybe I should have started with knight d5 because of that. Because after, if I take on f2 and take on f4 with check, yeah, this is very, very playable for white. Because his passed pawns are still very strong. I will try this. But let's say queen a8 check now ties my knight on d5 to along the long diagonal and makes it a lot harder for me to make any progress here. Here after knight e3, it's it looks awkward for him, but actually after queen e2 I have no immediate continuation, and this is maybe why I should have played h5 and not h6. I'm playing a little bit for sort of one move cheapos here. If he allows knight e3 now, it is actually kind of mate. Well, not mate, but I win a lot of material because after queen e2 I will have knight g4 check. But now my opponent finally stumbles upon the correct plan. Yeah, I'm not sure why I'm doing this. I could have won some pawns back a long time ago, but now I think I will just okay, here at least I'm not losing. Yeah, that was really weirdly played by me. Completely unnecessary. I mean, this was completely not required, and rather poorly played by me, if we're being entirely honest. Whoa! And now I lost that game. Yeah, this stream has been going on for too long. I forgot a8 covers g2. And now I can resign more or less, yeah? That's a weird game. King h1 probably actually wins here. As far as I can tell, I don't have a draw there. If he goes king h1 here, knight g3 check and king h2, I'm not sure I have the perpetual. Or maybe I do. Queen f4, a8, knight e2 check, king h1, knight g3 check. Yeah, I still have the perpetual, so I wasn't losing. But yeah, that was a really weirdly played endgame, which kind of illustrates how... before this show started, I was explaining to Jan that 3 hours are perfectly fine, and today it seems like even 2 hours is a struggle for me, so... One last 3-minute game, I think, is what we can squeeze in, and that will be 8, and I will hand you over into the capable hands of Jan, who will crush you and also flog you, and probably say unpleasant things to you in the process. It's a 3-minute game, so I read a very long question from Fradedi on the subject of people reaching a top rating of, let's say, between 2690 and 2720 and then dropping off, and there's a list of names there, and a question whether I know why this is. And to be entirely honest, my answer will be no, I don't. I think it's very personal. In all of these cases, there will be some kind of a personal explanation for that. And if you want to speak in more general terms, I think it's probably one of the more recognizable barriers in chess right now, where you're required to make the jump from, let's say, incredibly promising youngster, or maybe not that youngster, but in general I think it applies to younger players who get to that level and then start occasionally playing in the very top tournaments. And this is where you kind of either make the cut or you return to your previous position of being, you know, very strong but not absolutely top echelon, and you work some more and then you make it, or you don't. But no, I don't really have any specific insight on that subject. And this game kind of probably will be very short because I'm winning a full piece here. If my opponent actually does resign here, I will look for one more, because this doesn't really feel like it's a proper game to finish the stream on. Okay, let's look for one more 3-minute game somewhere. And maybe we can bookend the stream with, there was one Grunfeld in the beginning, and we can also play one Grunfeld at the end. I know you're there, Vegeta, but Bishop d2, do not like. Do not like is maybe a bit too strong. It's a perfectly fine opening, but it's not what I was looking for the final game of the show. You can also take on c3, take on d1 and play knight a4, and it's probably fine, but once again I'm looking for something slightly more adventurous here. I've watched some Radio Jan, not all of it. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I actually started watching something new recently, which is I have such a huge backlog that I normally don't take on new shows, but a source I respect generally recommended something called Brain Dead, which I started watching. I'm 2 episodes in, and I think it's a reasonably enjoyable show, which I'm not afraid to suggest to the viewers. In general, shows which deal with the brain-eating bugs from other planets are a safe bet. f6 is a bit inaccurate, yep, exactly because of that, because now I will probably not be... I should start with rook c8, that was just so careless. You should never allow white to take on c6 and improve the... I mean, not improve the structure, but the pawn on c3 is no longer weak. That was just such a horrible sequence of moves there. Shameful. Just start with rook c8 and then f6, king f7, and it's a slight advantage for the rest of the game. Not huge by any means, but you know, stable little edge for black. And instead we get this, which is just fine for white, completely fine. I will continue, you know, trying to create something here, because I think my opponent is trying to equalize a position which is not at all worse for him, which might give me additional chances here. But yeah, now once again I'm definitely ever so slightly better here with black. It remains unclear if you can actually win a position like this, but you can most certainly try. Did I ever play Sami Reshevsky? As they say on forums, not sure if level. I understand I'm old and slow, but I'm certainly not that old. And this now is a reasonably simply winning position, because at some point you just distract the white king and then you invade on the other side. And the way my opponent played, I can even pick up some more material with checks. Alright, it's 3 minutes to 6, so I think it's time for me to wrap this up. I apologize for the technical issues and for the fact that I was perhaps slightly slower than even usual today. But I will try and improve my performance by Thursday, which is most likely when the next Banter session will be. And once again, congratulations to the winners of the Chess Olympiad in Baku, who are the Americans in the open session and the Chinese in the women's session. Well played to the Ukrainians, who finished second in the men's section. I'm not even sure about the medalists in the women's Czech section. I didn't check it properly. And thanks for keeping me company. Thanks for asking me all kinds of questions in chat. Hope to see you back on Thursday. Cheerio.